My Lords,
my Lords, I realise I'm something of a fish out of water in this House, as I was in committee on this bill, which I think is fundamentally flawed in a number of respects, and I think it's flawed also in its approach to governance, which we're discussing today. But having said that, I will say that I'm generally sympathetic to the amendments proposed by my noble friend, Lady Stowell of Beeston. If we are going to have a flawed approach, then her amendments improve it somewhat. But my approach is rather different, and it's based on a fairly simple but important principle that we live in a free democracy. And if we are going to introduce a new legislative measure like this bill, which has far-reaching powers of censorship, taking us back 70 or 80 years in terms of the freedom of expression that we have been able to develop since the 1950s and 60s, taking us back to the days of Lady Chatterley's lover and the Lord Chamberlain, in effect, in equivalent terms, as far as the internet and the online world is concerned, then decisions of such a far-reaching character affecting our lives should be taken by somebody who is democratically accountable. So my approach is utterly different to that which my noble friend on the front bench has proposed. He has proposed amendments which limit yet further the Secretary of State's power to give directions to Ofcom. But the Secretary of State is the only party in that relationship who has a democratic accountability. We are transferring huge powers to a completely unaccountable regulator, and today my noble friend proposes transferring, in effect, even more powers to that unaccountable regulator. So if, to go back to a point that was discussed in committee and earlier in our consideration of report, if Ofcom behaves and takes certain decisions which make it impossible for Wikipedia to operate its current model, such that it has to close down at least its minority language websites, something which my noble friend says the government has no say over and no idea what Ofcom is going to do in that regard. But if they do make those decisions, such that that happens, to whom do members of the public protest? To whom do they offer their objections? There's no point writing to the Secretary of State, because he won't have had any say in the matter, my noble friend tells us. And we in this House will have forsworn the opportunity that I modestly proposed, that we should take those powers here in this House. So to whom do they put? No point writing to their MP, because all their MP can do is badger the Secretary of State. It is in a completely unaccountable structure. It's completely indefensible in a modern democratic society. So I do object to the amendments proposed by my noble friend, particularly 136 and 137. But I rise particularly to speak to the amendments in my name, which are 218, 220, 221 and 223, because what these say, this is surely the structure we want. We want a structure in which decisions are made by somebody who is accountable, but which are then properly scrutinised by Parliament. And what my amendments do is introduce that, particularly in respect of the Secretary of State's powers to set Ofcom's strategic objectives. This is the purpose of my Amendment 223, to which 220 and 226 are consequential. And what it would require is that those instructions, those directions, should be approved by Parliament through the affirmative process. At the moment, the proposal is they be approved by the negative process. I think that should be by the affirmative process. That's what my amendments seek to achieve. I don't think it requires very much argument. If we then move on to my amendment number 218, This relates not to setting of Ofcom strategic priorities, but the guidance to be given by the Secretary of State to Ofcom on the exercise of any function. My Lords, there is currently no parliamentary check on this guidance. It simply has to be laid before Parliament, but there is no procedures, neither negative nor affirmative procedure for this. Surely, my Lords, what we should be saying is that this too should be subject to the affirmative procedure, so that we have an opportunity, your Lordship's House has an opportunity to debate and comment on those directions, that guidance, and so that we actually have some of the features of a proper functioning democracy. So overall, I would say we need to have accountable decision makers. We do not need unaccountable regulators. We need accountable decision makers, and we need those decision makers to be subject to parliamentary scrutiny, and that is the burden of my argument and the effect of my amendments. And I would hope that they would command the support of the House.
The Codes of Practice